President, Secretary of the Board of Finance as prescribed in Indiana state statute.
So past practice of this board has been to replicate the leadership of the regular board for this particular board. I don't know if that's a pleasure of this board, but if it is, someone would need to nominate Katie. She's not here.
Yes. You gotta take a motion on that, right? Do I have a motion to keep it as the same?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Yep. All right, presentation of investment report for the calendar year 2023.
So we passed the first hurdle of 3 hurdles now for us to do. So right now, we have to go through our investment report for the school district here. Included in your packets, you will have a report here showing the monthly interest income that we earned. All of our holdings are at Centir Financial Bank. We are getting a very generous rate there. And we are earning good, very good interest on our holdings there. In 2022, so previous calendar year, we had a total of $185,148.89 in overall interest. For the 2023 school year, we received $546,653.11 on our holdings. On average, we had about 10% less cash in the bank at the time, so even with less cash in the bank, we're earning more. Our interest rates over the 12 months were at a low of 4.49 to a high of the current rate right now of 5.54. Again, this is in a checking account, so it's not like being invested in a CD or anything like that. We're getting a great rate just keeping it in our average.
I remember the old days of
Yes.
0.25.
$12,000 was like a max for the year, so like switching to Centir was a good move. In addition, we have no fees with them too.
Right.
So in past, we were not only reaping just $12,000 in interest from that, but we were also paying fees for our checking services. So Centir has been wonderful to Tri-Creek schools.
And you're getting
That's
a better rate than NICEAG.
Yes.
Just a little.
I love the CDs as
Even though this is public
Mortgage
information,
rates.
I'm constantly told by Centir, don't tell other schools. So I hope they don't watch this because I want a good thing to continue here. So, education fund received $447,265.90 of that, and the food service funds, because we do break that up, it's a separate fund, it's federally funded, they received $99,387.21. So the report is the first part. Yearly, we're supposed to go over our investment strategies. I am recommending we don't change anything unless I can get a better rate for any other reason through a CD or some other mechanism. But right now, this is a good solid keep that keeps our cash with us for our purposes and doesn't tie it up for any long-term time.
Sounds good.
So that is the first, and then we'll move on to the second part. We'll move on to the third part here. Third part, on a yearly basis, we have to go over our 2023 corporation financial conditions as reported by the department, the Distressed Units Appeals Board. This is public information, and there is a dashboard that I'll be able to show you at the end of the presentation, but there are 6 indicators that we have to go over on a yearly basis. This information, they're fiscal and qualitative indicators. They were developed back in 2018 and established to keep a guideline for school districts to establish health as far as financial health. DUAB, the Distressed Units Appeals Board, was established back then when we had a couple school districts in Indiana that were under some stress, financial stress, and they were taken over by the state at that point, Gary and Muncie schools. So state of Indiana established this review board, and they worked hand in hand with IASBO, my professional organization for business officials, to come up with fiscal condition qualitative, different qualities here that we can look at in a school district to determine whether or not they might need some guidance and action plans. On a yearly basis, they take a look at these and review them. They also look at other things too that would affect the financial health of the school district. Whether or not they are actively going towards a referendum if needed, actively cutting back on what they need to, whether or not they failed a referendum. So they will knock on your door and say, let's sit down. It's a very nice meeting, I will say, a very open meeting, because yes, our door was knocked upon this year because of the failed referendum. And Mr. Anderson and myself got to sit down and meet the DUAB board. And, oh yeah, that's right, Mr. Mitch joined us as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll go over these indicators and we'll talk about a little bit about what the DUAB board said in review of our numbers. The first indicator they look at is enrollment. Enrollment is a big predictor here of financial health, because of course if you have a huge decline or year over year decline, and you're not cutting back on your expenses, you're going to be flagged for some negative balances, I'm sure. So they highlight that over, and they look at this from this standpoint, 2014-15 school year to 22-23. Overall, we're at a negative here of about 168 students. We've decreased over the years, over those 9 school years. We were at 3,414 in 2014-15, and we're down to this year's count of 3,246. We did take a full dip, or a good dip there during the pandemic years, and we were on a steady decline there that you can see, but we are showing a trend of increasing slightly. So we're hoping that'll increase more. I dove a little bit deeper in here, and I believe you've seen this slide, but I thought it was great to bring it back up here because this gives you an overall look from 2009 to 2010. I go back to this date because in 2009-10 school year, that's when state funding changed. We went to state-funded system at this point. So we went to that funding formula during that year. And you can see when we switched to that state funding, that's when our enrollment started changing too. Every dollar is attached to every student that's here in our district from the state. So the more consistent that you are, if you've got increasing ADM, or average daily membership, that's what that stands for, then your monies are more consistent and start supporting your growth and supporting your needs. Looking at this slide, you'll see that back in 2009-10 school year, we were nearly 3,600 students, and this year 3,246. Over that time, it's a loss of 353 students throughout that time. If we had that enrollment of just about 3,600 students on our books right now, we'd have more than $3 million more in funding here. So it's just something to think about. Students are about $9,000 worth of funding from each for each student on our books here, and you can definitely think about the services that we probably had back in 2009-10 here versus the services that we have now and what we need to educate children. It's very different in that short span of time of how many services we need and how costly those services can be. The other thing is that you can look and think back, what programs were we offering back in 2009-10 versus now? We have, the welding, the Red Devil trades. We have a lot of opportunities here that we didn't have before, but with opportunity comes cost. So you can think about that, about how much we've added, but with less money too coming in per student on that realm, just from our loss. Demographic-wise, this is just another deep dive into that enrollment here. What this shows is that our free and reduced percentage or poverty rate here in school district was at a high in 2018 of 29.9. And it's creeping, it's up to 27.6 in 2023 here. One thing that I forgot to mention in the beginning of this, this information in this report, unfortunately, since we just ended calendar year 23, is on calendar year 22, because that's the only thing that's reported to the state that's there, and it's on 22-23 school year. So of course, we're in the 23-24, so it's not reflected here. Just so that you've got an idea, when I say 23, that's the school year 22-23. This is reporting on. So, yes, that is creeping a little bit. We're at 27.6% for free and reduced during this year. That went up 2% in 1 year. So that's, when I say it's creeping, it's definitely going up. That's a good jump. Special ed is at 15.5% over the total student population, and that went up 0.5%. And then ELL, pretty steady, went up 0.1 at 1.2. Fund balances is another thing that we look at in financial health year. And this breaks it down to categories of funds. Anything below the line is a negative fund. This larger blue negative over here, it says capital funds. That was a lot of construction going on at that time, and those were reimbursements, and it was negative at the end of the calendar year. The negatives that are here right now, that are below there, those are all, we've got, this one is federal funds, the peach. This one is federal stimulus, and this one is state funds. Those are all reimbursable grants. That was money in transit. So those items were submitted, we just didn't receive them on our books. Typically, those funds will be negative, and you'll see that if you compare other school districts. Annual deficit and surplus here. So expenditures have exceeded revenue in 5 of the last 8 years throughout the conscious effort to dedicate money back to the classroom. I will say you can see, so you're looking at the blue and the green here by comparison. The orange and the red are transfers between funds, because we transfer money from the education fund to the operations fund. So that's what you'll see. Those are exceptions, so they show up there, the transfers do. But what you're really looking at are the green to the blue. So green is revenues, blue expenditures. So you always want your green to be higher than your blue on this one. The yellow will just show whether it was a surplus or a deficit. Above the line is a surplus, below the line is a deficit. So you can definitely see the effects of the pandemic here. We were overspending what we were receiving, and then now you can see that we're at a surplus. But a lot of that is our federal funding that we've received for federal stimulus. It's our ESSER funds that are in there as well. It is the increase in funding that we did receive per student as well. So we did have a positive year in 2022, and in 2023, which is not posted, again, it's not on this report, we'll talk about that next January, but 2023, which I haven't uploaded to the state yet, we're gonna be working on that really soon, but we are showing a surplus as well. I'm gonna caution you that the surplus is a large surplus, but it is due mostly because we have staff that are in those ESSER funds that we took off our books in the education fund and moved them over. We knew this was gonna happen, we did it through a conscious effort on that. They will end up going back, and we will, and we are, as you referenced earlier, going to look at cost containment, and we've been working with our administrators on that. We've started that process, and we will have a plan to you in the spring on what our recommendations are for reductions here in order to level this out and to make sure that we're not spending beyond what our revenues are.
Does having surplus revenue hurt us in any way, meaning if the government sees that we have more, that they won't give us?
No, because this is solely from, no, not at this point, not at all.
That's not a factor in the formula.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
They just haven't figured that part out yet.
Right.
So the fourth slide or the fourth indicator that we look at are fund balances. These are major funds that we're looking at. So when I say major funds, I'm saying my education fund, operations fund, and rainy day. If we had referendum money, that would be included in there as well. That's something they look at, because these are what keeps our lights on or keeps our staff coming in. It's our major operations. It's not grant funds that we're looking at. So this is all of those major funds together. At the end of 2022, calendar 22, in December, we had a 17.1% cash balance of all those combined funds. If you just take your regular budget, you take 12 months of expenditures and you divide 100 by 12, you get 8.3%. So you want to have at least 1 month's worth of expenditures at the very least to survive, so that if that state payment doesn't come here, we can pay payroll. We can keep our lights on for that 1 month, because that's what absolutely minimum should be. Recommended is 2 months, 2 to 3 months. So a 17% cash balance is right where we are in the recommended realm. So we went slightly over that. Unofficially, 2023, and I hope to have these reports. I want to get them filed and uploaded and make sure everything's okay. So by the next board meeting, I should have the cash balance reports for you all clean. We rose our cash balance to 20.83. So we're going from that 17.1 to 20.83. Again, ESSER funds played, a good part in bringing our cash balance up to that amount. This next slide, I am looking only solely at education and rainy day funds. I kind of split it out so that we could look at operational stuff separately and educational stuff separately. I always throw rainy day funds together with the education fund because you can be flexible with those. Cash balance is 17.1%, but looking at the unofficial 2023 cash balance, we rose it to 23.5%. And this funds everything that touches classrooms, closes competitive compensation packages for our staff and all instructional needs. Looking at our operations fund here, you can see that we have been depleting. Our cash balance has been going down in the operations fund. So we had it in 2014, we had a 66.5 or 66.7% cash balance, and we're down to a 17% cash balance here. Most recently, in the last couple of years, 19, 20, 21, 22, you can see that we've kind of been on a trend of depleting that. Yes, we've been doing that because we've been backing off on the transfer of funds between the two, but circuit breaker has also been a real impact on this one. Last year, circuit breaker, $652,000 in circuit breaker costs. Just like when we were discussing that during the referendum, it did pan out that way. That $652,000 were lost to the circuit breaker. Another thing we look at is revenue by type. This tells you, I will say DUAB looks at this because schools that have referendums, there will be a referendum color in there, and it'll tell them how dependent you are on that referendum money. It'll tell you how dependent you are on any of the revenue that's coming in here. So you can see that purplish section here that is very solid in the middle here. We are very dependent, because that's the bulk of our revenue coming in, on our state revenue, which would be our tuition support for every student that is here. So again, enrollment is important here, and every student that we lose or decline in enrollment, you feel it in the budget. So you can see that we're really, really dependent on that. The other one would be our tax revenue. And fortunately, our folks pay their taxes, so that's good.
That one's a choice.
Right. Slide 6, we don't have to go over, unfortunately, because it is the referendum slide that would show you your percentage of total revenue based on referendum. I did take a look at this at some of the school districts, because yes, the trend at the polls is, not in favor of referendums, but I wanted to see what those school districts, what those percentages of reliance on of their total revenue. Some school districts are in the 8 to 10%. I would say like Central, Hammond, so very reliant on their monies that they get through the referendum to support. Ground Point was in the 4% range. So typically, if they're very reliant, from what I could see across the state, they were in the 8% and above range. So it was interesting to see that. I wanted to bring up the Lake County tax rate comparison. This is not one of the fiscal indicators that we have to go over. This is a Dana bonus slide, so you guys are lucky to see it right now. Right there is the arrow where it shows Tri Creek, $1.05. That's our tax rate in 2023, and I'm happy to report that we just had our budget reviewed as of Monday, and we hit our tax rate, our target tax rate of $1.05 as well. So tax rate is not going up for our school district here, as promised. The X's are the school districts that now do not have a referendum. So that you can see, you've got your Lake Ridge, Maryville, Lake Station, Hammond, Tri Creek, Highland, East Chicago, and Whiting. The next slide here, I figured you'd want some information on fund balance, since fund balance is a sensitive subject and that we need to take a look at. So I wanted to show you what fund balance comparison looks like in our region here. So Tri Creek there is in the yellow range there, that yellow arrow, 17.1. You will see all the way to the right, you have School City of Hammond, 2.4% cash balance in 2022. I don't know where it's sitting at the end of this pass, and they did not pass a referendum. All the way up to School City of Highland has an 83.5%. This slide is showing including referendums, if school districts have a referendum. So you can see where we are, we're fourth from the bottom as far as cash balance, overall cash balance. Highland is next to us with 22.4. And you can see, again, I put the X's out there so you could see who has a referendum and who doesn't. If I switch to the next slide, if I remove referendum from all those other school districts, we do slide up a notch, 17.1, and if I take the referendum money out of the equation for Lake Central, their cash balance is 17.9% versus before they are 29.5 with their referendum money. So you could see how much that really supports a school district to help meet their needs. And removing School City of Hammond's, it's 2.2% there on the bottom, and it goes up to Whiting. Still, they don't have a referendum, so it's 83.5. These reports can be found on the DUAB site. I don't know how it's right here. You can access the data. Go here, and then School Corporation's Fiscal Indicators Dashboard. I had fun this afternoon playing around with this, comparing us to other school districts. So I'm sure you're going to want to do that. So you can just type in a school district. I'm typing in Hanover just because we went over ours. And it brings up their information and their enrollment trends. So you could see to the north, of course, they're growing. You could see lines, similar funds that are below. They highlight, you can hover over here, it'll tell you exactly all the information. Annual surplus and deficit, you can go in here and select funds to look at if you want to build your own kind of things. It's a lot of fun for a person like me, I guess, but yeah, all those.
We'll take your word.
Yeah, you'll take your word. All these reports that I went over are out there, and you can compare us to region schools and things like that as well. One thing I will be bringing to you, well, first off, I want to circle back to our meeting with the DUAB board. Follow up from the DUAB board, once they met with us, we presented information, they discussed with us our plans, an action plan now that the referendum hasn't passed. What next? And how are you going to survive because you needed this money? So we discussed our action plan of pulling together cuts and cost containment. They interviewed overall our processes of finance and what we discussed and everything, and they took all that information back to the board and gave it to summary form to the board, and then they came up with either a recommendation plan or something, or what the next steps would be. And I should have highlighted this, but it says here, based on our review of this, based on the review of the summary, so their board, and the fiscal indicators of your school corporation, DUAB determined that periodic monitoring of your school corporation is necessary at this time. Again, it was a wonderful meeting, very growth-oriented, very, let's talk about things you can do and suggestions, and I think it was a good conversation. So they will be back. And again, this is something when they see cash balances moving in a direction and they see a failed referendum that they do follow up on, because it is important to be, fiscally responsible and to be able to do that. So we will have other meetings, on this. Part of their recommendations was also to adopt, a reserve policy here. A policy that would state our, thresholds for cash balances, like what we feel is adequate. I just presented on 8.3 being the minimum and 17 being healthy, but, we need to put that in writing, or we need to put something that's in writing that the board would feel comfortable with. So I've been working with, the executive director and their assistant there to develop a policy. Not too many school districts have a policy like that. I've been asking for samples and I'm not getting, most of them say, well, we follow what the state wants, but they don't put it in writing. It's going to be a trend that school districts are going to be doing this. So next week I will be working with the region actually and bringing information that I've been working on to the region schools and to the business managers so that we can all work on a policy and work on items that we'd want to take.
I would think
To the
that they
board.
would have some type of a template, so at least to give you some guidance.
They've given me some, yeah, they have, from DUAB they have, but it's a new concept. It's
Right.
not something that we've had. It's
But I mean,
always-
if it's the concept that they're looking
I
at
know.
and they understand, they should be able to provide it to us, at least as a template, not mandatory.
Yeah, so they pointed me in the right direction, so that's good, and the
We trust you.
conversation's open, so I'm happy. So I will be bringing a policy, to both Mr. Anderson and Mrs. Hayden here to look at, Harden, sorry, wrong one. Mrs. Harden to, review, and then we'll bring it to the board, for adoption.
Sounds good.
Soon. Okay. Any questions? I think so. Okay.
I can do C now. Accept the report of investments as presented and continue the current policy of investments to fund the facilities, the goals and objectives of the Board of School Trustees, protect the interests of the stakeholders of the Tri-Creek School Corporation, provide the best service possible.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes.